A little Afghan girl walked into a minefield to save a Navy SEAL. And the next day, 100 soldiers brought her a life-changing gift. In the middle of a war zone, a wounded soldier lay bleeding in the dirt, certain no one would dare come for him. But then, a barefoot child stepped onto the field of death, one tiny step at a time, risking everything for a man she didn't even know. The world would call it a miracle. Yet, in her village, that miracle came with a terrible price. Her father called it shame. The soldiers called it courage. And one man swore he'd repay her, no matter the cost. The next morning, the mountains shook as 100 soldiers marched into the village, carrying a gift that would change her life forever. But what happened after that gift, no one could have imagined. Because in a place where kindness is forbidden, how far will courage go before it's silenced? The dawn came slow and gold over the Hindu Kush, spreading light across the jagged peaks, like honey poured over broken glass. Commander Jack Reynolds stood beside the dusty Humvee, one boot propped on the bumper, studying a map so worn the creases had turned to holes. His calloused finger traced a route through the valley below. A path they'd walked a dozen times before, but never safely. Same grid, same risk, he muttered. Sergeant Mike Torres leaned against the vehicle, helmet tilted back. You know what they say, Commander. Lightning never strikes the same place twice. That's not even true, said Corporal Daniels, adjusting his rifle strap. Lightning loves tall trees. Good thing you're short then, Torres shot back. A few of the men chuckled, but the sound died fast. Humor out here was a match struck in the wind. It flared bright and disappeared just as quick. Jack didn't look up from the map. He'd learned long ago that laughter in a war zone was just another way of saying a prayer. Keep it tight, Jack said. Eyes open. We sweep the perimeter, mark what we find, and get back before lunch. One last patrol, Torres said, clapping dust from his gloves. Jack's jaw tightened. Don't say that. What? One last patrol. That's bad luck. Torres grinned. You getting superstitious on us, sir? Jack folded the map and tucked it into his vest. I'm getting careful. The unit moved out in formation, boots crunching over gravel and stone. The landscape stretched before them like something forgotten by God. Barren hills, skeletal trees, and villages built from mud and sorrow. The air tasted of dust and diesel fuel. Jack's eyes scanned the ridges, the shadows, the places where danger liked to hide. He prayed as he walked. Not out loud, just quiet words in his mind, the same ones he'd whispered since he was a boy sitting in a Virginia church pew. Lord, guide my steps, protect my men. Let us do good here. But the guilt came with the prayer, like it always did. The faces he couldn't forget. The family caught in crossfire 3 months back. The mother's scream, the way the dust settled over everything after, making it all look like a terrible painting. Jack shook his head. Focus. Here. Now. A distant explosion cracked the morning silence, dull and rolling somewhere beyond the next hill. The men froze. Ours or theirs? Daniels whispered. Neither, Jack said. Old ordnance. Soviet, probably. Great. Leftovers from a war older than I am. Every step out here is a gamble, Torres muttered. They pressed on. As they neared the village on the valley's edge, Jack noticed the locals. A few women stood near low stone walls, faces covered, eyes watchful. An old man sat beneath a twisted tree, whittling something from wood. Children peeked from doorways, then vanished like smoke. But one child stayed. A little girl, barefoot, no older than 8. She stood at the village's edge, clutching a doll made from rags and string. Her dark eyes followed the soldiers with something that wasn't fear, more like curiosity, maybe wonder. Jack met her gaze for a heartbeat. She didn't run. Brave kid, he thought. Commander, Torres called softly. We're clear to move. Jack nodded. and turned away. The girl stayed where she was, small and still against the backdrop of dust and stone. The patrol continued into the valley as the sun climbed higher, turning the landscape into a furnace. Sweat soaked through Jack's uniform. His legs ached. He'd been doing this too long. Too many tours, too many mountains, too many moments where he wondered if God was still listening. By late afternoon, the shadows stretched long and thin. The valley opened before them, wide and empty. Jack raised his fist. The unit stopped. "Hold," he said. Something wasn't right. The ground ahead looked disturbed. Too smooth, too even, like someone had brushed it clean. Jack's stomach tightened. He took one step forward. Then he saw it. A glint in the dirt. Metal. Small. Half buried. His heart stopped. Back! The world exploded. The blast lifted him off his feet and threw him backward. Sound became pressure. Light became pain. He hit the ground hard, skidding through gravel and rock. His ears rang, high and sharp, drowning out everything. He tried to move. Couldn't. His legs screamed. His vision blurred. Through the haze, he saw Torres shouting something. Mouth moving. No sound. Daniels was on the ground too, clutching his arm. Jack's head lolled to the side. Dust hung in the air like fog. Blood, warm and wet, spread beneath him. Lord, he thought, not like this. The sky above was impossibly blue. The kind of blue that didn't belong in a place like this. His vision dimmed, the ringing faded, and then silence. The smoke rose lazy and gray, spiraling up from the crater like a ghost looking for heaven. Jack's eyes cracked open. The sky above spun in slow circles, blue and merciless. He tried to sit up. Pain exploded through his left leg, white-hot and sharp enough to steal his breath. He fell back against the dirt, gasping. His hand moved to his thigh. Wet. Warm. Too much blood. "Torres," he croaked. His voice came out broken, barely a whisper. No answer. He turned his head, slow and careful. The valley stretched empty around him. Boot prints in the dust led away. His men had pulled back. Smart. Standard protocol. Get clear of the blast zone. Call for extraction. His radio crackled somewhere near his shoulder. Static hissed and popped. "Reynolds! Copy!" The voice faded in and out like a bad signal. Jack fumbled for the radio with shaking fingers. Found it. Pressed the button. "Still here," he managed. "Can't move." More static. Then Torres's voice, tight with worry. "Evac's coming, sir. 30 minutes. Stay put." Jack almost laughed. Stay put. Like he had a choice. He let the radio fall into the dirt beside him. The sun beat down, turning his uniform into an oven. Sweat stung his eyes. His mouth tasted like copper and dust. The pain came in waves. He rode them out, counting breaths, whispering words he'd memorized as a boy. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Minutes stretched into hours. The sun crawled across the sky, slow as judgment. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Green pastures. Jack would have laughed again if he had the strength. Nothing green here. Just rock and dust and death waiting patient in the soil. His vision blurred, cleared, blurred again. "He restoreth my soul." Did he? Jack wasn't sure anymore. Too many souls lost. Too many faces he couldn't save. The little girl from the village edge floated through his mind. Barefoot. Brave. Still as stone while the world burned around her. He wondered if she was safe. On the ridge above, Amina pressed herself flat against the warm stone, watching. The explosion had shaken the ground beneath her feet. She'd been gathering firewood when the boom rolled across the valley like thunder. Her mother had screamed her name, dragged her back toward the village, but Amina had broken free and climbed the ridge instead. She had to see. Now she watched the soldier lying in the dirt, not moving. Sometimes his hand would twitch. Sometimes his chest would rise and fall, but mostly he was still. Amina! Her mother's voice carried on the wind, sharp with fear. Come away from there. But Amina didn't move. She'd seen this before. The stillness, the blood spreading dark against the earth. She'd watched her brother die the same way. 6 months passed. He'd been running, just running, when the ground opened beneath him and swallowed him whole. Afterward, they'd found pieces, a shoe, part of his shirt. She still dreamed about it. Her mother appeared at the base of the ridge, face tight with worry. You cannot help him. He is not ours to save. He is dying, Amina whispered. That is not your burden. Amina's fingers tightened around her doll, the doll her brother had made for her, stitching scraps together with thread pulled from his own coat. She pressed it to her chest. Her mother climbed partway up the ridge. The field is full of death. You step there, you die too. You understand? Amina nodded, but she didn't look away from the soldier. Promise me, her mother said. I promise. Her mother stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked back toward the village, shoulders heavy. Amina stayed. She watched the sun sink lower, watched the shadows grow long, watched the soldier's hand move less and less. Another soul dying alone, she thought. Just like my brother. Something twisted in her chest, hot and bright and impossible to ignore. Her father had taught her that God saw everything, every sparrow that fell, every tear that dropped, every choice that mattered. This mattered. Night came slow, painting the valley purple and gold before swallowing it in darkness. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and distance. Amina slipped from her house like a shadow, bare feet silent on the packed earth. Her mother slept inside, exhausted from worry. Her father was gone, trading in the next village over. She was alone. She clutched her doll tight against her chest and walked toward the edge of the minefield. The wind howled across the open ground, tugging at her thin dress. The soldier lay somewhere in the darkness ahead, maybe dead already, maybe holding on by a thread. Amina's heart hammered against her ribs. One step, that's all it took. One step onto ground that might explode. One step toward a stranger she didn't know. In a war she didn't understand. Her brother's face flashed in her mind. His smile, his laugh. No more, she thought. No more dying alone. She took a breath and stepped into the minefield. The moon hung pale and thin above the valley, casting silver shadows across the minefield. Amina's bare feet pressed into the cool dirt, each step careful and slow. She'd done this before, walked dangerous ground. Not minefields, but narrow mountain paths where one wrong step meant falling. Her father had taught her to watch, to listen, to feel the earth before trusting it. This was different. This was death, hiding quiet beneath the dust. But she couldn't stop now. In her left hand, she carried a small cloth bag. Inside, pebbles from the river, sticks from the thorn trees, things to mark her path. She took 3 steps, stopped, placed a white pebble in the dirt. 3 more steps, another pebble. The wind tugged at her dress. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. The night pressed close around her, thick with fear. She took another step. The ground held. Thank you, she whispered to the sky. Thank you, thank you. Step, pebble, step, stick, step, pebble. The soldier lay maybe 30 paces ahead. She could see him now in the moonlight, a dark shape sprawled in the dust. Not moving. Please don't be dead. Please. She kept walking. Jack's eyes opened to darkness. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then the pain reminded him. Sharp, burning, real. He blinked, trying to focus. The sky above swam with stars. His leg throbbed with each heartbeat. Still alive, he thought. Somehow. Movement caught his eye. He turned his head, slow and careful. A small figure moved across the field toward him, low to the ground. Careful. Jack's heart seized. A child. No, he croaked. His voice came out broken, barely a sound. No, go back. The figure kept coming. Jack tried to push himself up. His arms shook. His legs screamed protest. He fell back, gasping. Please, he called out, louder this time. Stop! Don't! The child paused, looked toward him. Even in the darkness, he could see her size. Tiny, maybe 8 years old, barefoot, alone in a field full of death. Terror flooded through him, cold and sharp. Go back, he shouted. You'll die. Please. But she didn't understand his words. She tilted her head, watching him. Then she kept walking. Step, pause, step, pause. Jack's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream, wanted to crawl toward her, pull her back, but he couldn't move, could barely breathe. All he could do was watch this child walk closer to him, closer to death, and pray. God, please, not her, not like this. Amina heard the fear in the soldier's voice, even if she didn't know his words. His hands moved, waving. His face twisted with worry. He was trying to protect her. Something warm spread through her chest. She kept walking, placing her markers carefully. White pebble, thin stick, smooth stone. The soldier's voice grew weaker. He stopped shouting and just watched, his eyes wide in the moonlight. Amina counted her steps. 20 more. 15. 10. She could see him clearly now. Blood soaked his leg. His face looked pale, ghostly. His lips moved in words she couldn't hear. 5 steps. 3. 1. She knelt beside him in the dirt. Up close, he looked younger than she'd thought. His eyes were blue, pale like the sky before sunrise. Tears streaked the dust on his cheeks. No die, she whispered. It was all the English she knew. 2 words her brother had taught her, practicing from an old book he'd found. She didn't know what the words meant together, only that they were important. The soldier stared at her. His mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Amina reached up and unwrapped the scarf from her head. The one her mother had made, dyed deep red from pomegranate skins. She folded it quick and pressed it against the soldier's bleeding leg. He gasped, fingers digging into the dirt. Sorry, she whispered in Pashto, knowing he wouldn't understand. I'm sorry. She tied the scarf tight, the way she'd seen her mother wrap wounds. The fabric soaked through immediately, but it was better than nothing. No die, she said again, softer this time. She took his hand, large and rough and trembling, and squeezed it. No die. His fingers closed around hers. A sob broke from his chest. Tears ran down his face. His lips moved in words that sounded like prayer. Amina sat with him in the dust, holding his hand, and waited. The flare burst overhead without warning, brilliant white light that turned night into day. Amina jerked back, startled. The soldier's hand tightened on hers. Then came the sound, heavy and rhythmic. Whump, whump, whump. The air itself seemed to shake. Helicopters, 2 of them, coming fast and low across the valley. Their lights swept the ground, searching. Voices shouted from the edge of the minefield. American voices, urgent and afraid. Commander Reynolds, can you hear me? We're coming in. Wait, another voice, sharp with command. The field. The soldier, Reynolds, tried to lift his head. Failed. His grip on Amina's hand went slack. The helicopters landed beyond the minefield. Soldiers poured out, running to the edge, then stopping hard. Afraid to step forward. Afraid of the death hiding in the dirt. We need a path, someone shouted. Amina stood. Her legs shook, but she forced them steady. She walked back the way she'd come, stepping carefully on each marker. Pebble, stick, stone. Her hand pointed to each one as she moved. Look, a soldier called. The girl! She's marking it! Follow her path, exactly where she steps. Men rushed forward, boots heavy in the dust, following the small white pebbles and crooked sticks that glowed in the flare light. They reached Reynolds, lifted him, carried him fast along Amina's path while she stood to the side, heart hammering. More soldiers came. A woman knelt beside Amina, checking her for injuries, speaking soft words she didn't understand. But Amina's eyes stayed on the soldier, on Reynolds, as they loaded him into the helicopter. Just before the door closed, he turned his head, found her in the crowd. Their eyes met. He pressed his hand to his heart, then pointed to her. "Thank you," his gesture said. Amina touched her own heart and nodded. The helicopter rose into the night sky, beating the air, carrying him away to safety. Amina watched until the lights disappeared beyond the mountains. Then she turned and walked home through the darkness, her bare feet knowing the way. The sun climbed over the mountains, spilling gold across the valley. Where darkness had hidden death the night before, now light revealed everything. The crater, the scattered equipment, the paths marked with pebbles and sticks that saved lives. Jack Reynolds lay strapped to a stretcher inside the helicopter, his leg wrapped thick with bandages. The morphine made everything soft and distant, like watching the world through clouded glass. Medics worked around him, checking vitals, adjusting IVs. Their voices blended with the helicopter's roar. But Jack only had eyes for the window. Below, the village grew smaller, mud brick houses, narrow paths, and there, two figures standing in the dust. A woman in dark clothing, a child beside her, barefoot, watching the sky. The scarf was gone from Amina's neck. Jack's throat tightened, his hand pressed against the window glass. "Thank you," he thought, knowing she couldn't hear. "Thank you, little one." The helicopter banked hard. The village disappeared behind the mountains. Jack closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The base hospital smelled like antiseptic and coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Nurses moved between beds with practiced efficiency. Jack woke to find Dr. Sarah Collins checking his chart. She was 30-something, with tired eyes and steady hands. A medic first, but also a missionary nurse who'd served 2 tours. "Welcome back, Commander," she said. "You gave us quite a scare." Jack's mouth felt like sand. "The girl," he croaked. "The one who—" "We know." Sarah's expression softened. "Everyone knows. The whole base is talking about her." Within hours, word spread like brush fire. The Afghan angel, the barefoot child who walked into a minefield, an 8-year-old who saved a Navy SEAL with nothing but courage and a scarf. Soldiers stopped by Jack's bed, asked questions, wanted to hear the story firsthand. Jack told it simple, honest. She walked through death to reach me, marked the path with pebbles, tied her scarf around my leg. His voice broke. "She's just a kid." "What's her name?" someone asked. "Amina." The name passed from mouth to mouth. Amina. The girl with no fear. That evening, Jack called for Sarah. When she arrived, he was sitting up despite the pain, his face set with determination. "We have to help her family," he said. "Food, medicine, protection, something." Sarah's expression fell. "Commander, I know we can do something. We have resources, humanitarian aid programs. It's not that simple." Sarah pulled up a chair. "The local customs, the tribal politics, we can't just intervene. Her father might see it as interference, as dishonor." "Dishonor?" Jack's hands clenched the sheets. "She saved my life." "I know. But to him, she touched a foreign man, broke cultural rules." Sarah's voice dropped. "We've already heard rumors. He's angry." Jack stared at her. "What kind of angry?" "The kind where he might send her away, to relatives in another province." The words hit Jack like a fist. "No, that's not. She risked everything." "I know." Sarah stood. "But our hands are tied. I'm sorry." She left him there, alone with his fury and helplessness. Jack stared at the ceiling and prayed. In the village, Amina knelt on the floor of her home while her father paced. Karim was a tall man, lean from hard work and harder years. His face was weathered, his beard streaked with gray. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You shamed us," he said in Pashto, sharp as broken glass. Amina's mother stood in the corner, silent. Her hands twisted her shawl. "I helped," Amina whispered. "You touched a foreign soldier." Karim stopped pacing, turned to face her. "You removed your scarf, walked alone at night, like you have no family, no honor." He was dying. Silence. Karim's hand rose, though he didn't strike, just pointed toward the door. "Tomorrow, you go to your uncle's house, in Kandahar. You will stay there until you learn obedience." Amina's chest went tight. Kandahar was far away. She'd never been farther than the next village. Her mother made a small sound, quickly swallowed it. "Please, father." "I have spoken." Karim walked out, leaving Amina kneeling on the cold floor. Her mother came then, knelt beside her, pulled her close without words. Amina buried her face in her mother's shoulder and tried not to cry. The next afternoon, dust rose on the horizon. Amina was packing her few belongings, a spare dress, her brother's old book, the doll she'd carried all her life, when her mother rushed to the window. "Karim," she called. "Come see." Amina's father joined her. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Soldiers, not a patrol, not a small unit, a column, dozens of them, maybe 100. Marching in formation down the valley road toward the village. Villagers poured from their homes. Children ran to watch. Men gathered with worried faces. The soldiers came to a halt at the village edge. Their commander stepped forward, a stern-faced captain with graying hair. Then the ranks parted. A man emerged on crutches, bandaged leg, pale face, blue eyes that scanned the crowd until they found a small girl standing in a doorway. Commander Jack Reynolds had come back. Jack's leg screamed with every step, but he kept moving. The soldiers followed, carrying wooden crates and bundles. The village elder approached, speaking Pashto. A translator relayed his confusion, his concern. Jack raised his hand. "I came to honor a debt." The translator repeated his words. Jack gestured. 4 soldiers stepped forward carrying something built from spare lumber and careful hands. A dollhouse, small but sturdy, with a pitched roof and tiny windows. They set it in the dust before Amina's home. Jack hobbled forward, looked at Karim directly. "Your daughter saved my life," he said through the translator. "She walked through a minefield. She showed courage that shames every soldier here, including me." Karim's jaw tightened. Jack continued, "This house is for that courage, for her bravery, for her pure heart." He turned, gestured. The 100 soldiers came to attention as one. Boots clicked, hands raised in salute. To an 8-year-old girl in a dusty village. Amina stood frozen in her doorway, eyes wide. Jack lowered himself to one knee despite the pain. He reached into his pocket and pulled out fabric. Red, cleaned, carefully folded. Her scarf. He held it toward her. "Please," he said softly. Amina stepped forward slowly, took the scarf with trembling hands. Jack placed it around her neck himself, his large, scarred hands gentle as prayer. "Thank you," he whispered in English, then repeated it in broken Pashto. "Tashakor." Amina's eyes filled with tears. She touched the scarf, looked up at this strange soldier who'd come back for her. Then she did something no one expected. She hugged him. Jack's arms came around her carefully. He pressed his eyes shut. Behind them, the wind lifted the American flags. The soldiers held their salute as the Afghan sun blazed overhead. The sun dipped low, painting the village in shades of amber and rust. Families gathered around the wooden crates the soldiers had left behind. Children pulled out blankets, their fingers tracing the strange fabric. Women unwrapped packages of rice and flour, whispering in amazement at the quantity. Amina sat on the step of her home, the dollhouse beside her. She ran her hand along its tiny roof, still unable to believe it was real. Laughter rippled through the square. A boy found a bag of hard candies and held one up to the fading light. His mother scolded him, but her eyes were soft. Yet not everyone smiled. The village elders stood in a tight circle near the well. Their voices carried on the evening breeze, low, urgent, troubled. "This will bring consequences," one said. He was old, his beard white as snow. "The foreigners draw attention." "They honored us," another argued. "Showed respect." "Respect?" The elder spat into the dust. "They parade through our home with weapons and flags. They make us targets. For who?" The question hung unanswered. Nearby, Karim sat alone on a stone wall, watching the celebration with hollow eyes. His hands gripped his knees. His jaw worked silently. Amina's mother approached him, carrying tea in a chipped cup. She offered it without speaking. Karim took it, but didn't drink. "They will say I allowed this." "You didn't allow anything. The soldiers came on their own." "Because of her." He glanced toward Amina. "Because she disobeyed." His wife's voice hardened. "Because she has courage. More than grown men." Karim flinched as if struck. He stared into the tea, his reflection rippling. "They will come. The militants. They will say we collaborated. Then we tell them the truth, that we had no choice. The truth." Karim's laugh was bitter. "When has truth protected anyone?" His wife placed her hand on his shoulder. "She saved a life, Karim." "Would you rather she let him die?" He had no answer. 3 days passed. The village settled back into routine, but the air felt different, heavier. Eyes watched from the hills. On the third morning, Amina woke to find markings on the wall near the well, crude letters in black paint. She couldn't read them, but the adults who gathered spoke in frightened whispers. "Death to those who bow to outsiders. American dogs and their servants." Her father stood before the graffiti, face pale. Other men argued beside him, voices rising. "We did nothing wrong. It doesn't matter. They think we did. We should report this to the soldiers." "And make it worse?" Amina pressed herself against the doorway, heart pounding. That afternoon, a dusty truck pulled into the village. A woman climbed out carrying a canvas bag marked with a red cross. Dr. Sarah Collins had arrived. Sarah moved through the village with practiced ease. She sat up beneath a tattered canopy and began treating anyone who needed help. A man with an infected cut, a child with a fever, an elderly woman whose joints ached from years of hard labor. Word spread quickly. The American doctor who speaks kindly, who asks before touching, who doesn't charge payment. Amina watched from a distance, curious but cautious. Sarah noticed her, smiled, waved her closer. The girl approached slowly, clutching her doll. "Hello," Sarah said gently. She knelt to Amina's height. "You must be the brave one everyone talks about." Amina didn't understand the words, but she recognized the warmth in the woman's voice. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small picture book. Bright colors, simple drawings. She opened it and pointed to an image of a bird. "Bird," she said clearly. Amina's eyes widened. Sarah pointed to herself. "Sarah!" Then to Amina. "You, Amina," the girl whispered. Sarah's smile grew. "Amina. Beautiful name." The visits became routine. Every few days, Sarah returned, sometimes to treat patients, sometimes just to sit with Amina beneath the canopy and teach. "Apple," Sarah said, showing a picture. "Apple," Amina repeated carefully. "Very good." The girl beamed. Sarah taught her letters next. Drew them in the dust with a stick. A, B, C. Amina copied them, her small fingers gripping the stick tightly. She worked with fierce concentration, tongue between her teeth. "You're a fast learner," Sarah murmured, more to herself than the child. When Amina's mother brought tea, Sarah accepted it gratefully. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the girl practice her letters over and over. "She has light in her," Sarah said through gestures and broken Pashto. "Special." Amina's mother nodded. Her eyes shimmered. "Too much light. It draws moths." Sarah didn't fully understand, but the sadness in the woman's voice needed no translation. That evening, Sarah packed her supplies as the sun melted into the horizon. Lanterns flickered to life across the village, casting pools of orange warmth. Amina stood beside her, reluctant to say goodbye. Sarah knelt one last time, pulled a small stack of books from her bag. "For you, to practice." Amina hugged them to her chest like treasure. "I'll come back soon," Sarah promised, "with more books, more words." She climbed into her truck, started the engine, waved through the dusty window. Amina waved back until the truck disappeared down the darkening road. The village grew quiet. Families retreated to their homes. Lantern light dimmed. Near the edge of the square, two figures emerged from the shadows. Men with scarves wrapped around their faces, rifles slung across their backs. They stood where Sarah's truck had been parked. One spat into the dirt. "The American woman," he muttered in Pashto. "She returns too often. Teaching the girl, making them soft. We should send a message. Soon." They melted back into darkness, leaving only boot prints in the dust. A week later, Sarah sat cross-legged in her tent, a battery-powered lantern casting warm light across the makeshift desk. Her pen moved steadily across paper, the scratching sound rhythmic in the quiet evening. "Dear Mom and Dad, you asked me what gives me hope out here. Her name is Amina." Sarah paused, smiled softly, and continued. "She's 8 years old, barefoot, brave beyond anything I've ever witnessed. The soldiers talk about her like she's their own daughter. You should hear them. These tough men who've seen the worst of war. Their voices go gentle when they say her name. They call her the Little Angel. They say she reminded them why they came here in the first place. She's learning to read. She grips the pencil so tight her knuckles turn white, but she won't quit until she gets the letters right. Yesterday she wrote her name for the first time. The look on her face. Mom, I wish you could have seen it. Pure joy. Maybe that's what hope looks like. A child writing her name in the dust." Sarah set down her pen and read the words back. They felt true. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into an envelope. Outside, the base hummed with quiet activity. Generators, distant voices, the sound of footsteps on gravel. She sealed the envelope and added it to the stack going out in tomorrow's mail. At the main base hospital, Jack sat propped against pillows, his injured leg elevated. The room smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. Physical therapy had been brutal today, but he refused to complain. His men crowded around his bed, 5 of them still dusty from patrol. They'd brought cards and magazines, but no one seemed interested in playing. "You got mail, Commander," one said, tossing an envelope onto the blanket. Jack recognized Sarah's handwriting immediately. He opened it carefully. The letter was 3 pages long. She wrote about the village, the families, the children who'd started showing up to her medical tent just to practice English words. And she wrote about Amina. "The girl who saved you is teaching herself to read. She studies every night by lamplight. Her mother says she falls asleep with books under her pillow. The other children are starting to follow her example. They want to learn too." Jack's throat tightened. He cleared it roughly. "What's it say?" one of his men asked. Jack looked up, met their eyes. "Sarah says the girl, Amina, she's learning to read." Silence settled over the room. "She saved your life, and now she's studying English," another soldier said quietly. "Kids got more heart than most adults." Jack nodded, kept reading aloud. "Your men changed something here, Jack. Not with weapons or missions, with kindness. The villagers still talk about the day 100 soldiers marched to honor one little girl. They say it was like witnessing a miracle." He finished the letter. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, the youngest seal, barely 22, broke the silence. "We should do more." "More what?" Jack asked. "I don't know. Something. She's just a kid, and she's in danger because she helped us." The others murmured agreement. Jack folded the letter slowly. His mind was already turning. "Sarah mentioned the militants are targeting families who cooperate with us. So we protect them." "Can't. Not officially. Brass won't authorize resources for civilian relocation without a direct threat assessment. Then we do it unofficially." Jack looked at his men, saw determination in their faces, the same fire that had carried them through impossible missions. "What are you thinking, Commander?" one asked. Jack reached for the notebook on his bedside table, flipped it open, started writing. "Operation Little Star," he said. "Volunteer-based. We raise funds among the troops, build schools, provide supplies, protection where we can manage it." He looked up. "And we push hard for humanitarian asylum for Amina's family. Bureaucracy will fight that. Let them fight. We'll push harder." His men exchanged glances. Slow smiles spread. "I'm in," the youngest said immediately. "Same. Count me in." Within minutes, they were planning. Who to contact, how to structure the drive, which officers might support them quietly, even if they couldn't do so publicly. Jack wrote notes furiously, his pen flying across the page. For the first time since the explosion, he felt purpose beyond survival. He would repay that child's courage, no matter what it took. Back in the village, Amina knelt in the dirt outside her home, carefully forming letters with a stick. The sun hung low, painting everything gold. Her father watched from the doorway, arms crossed, face unreadable. She finished writing and sat back, proud, turned to show him. "Look, Baba." 4 letters in the dust. Amina. Karim stepped closer, stared down at his daughter's name, written in the language of foreigners. Something shifted in his chest. Unexpected, uncomfortable. "You wrote this?" His voice was gruff. She nodded eagerly. "Dr. Sarah taught me. And I can write bird, too." "And apple," she demonstrated quickly, her small hand steady. Karim knelt beside her, reached out and traced the letters with one calloused finger. His daughter, writing her own name. "It's good," he said quietly. Amina's face lit up like sunrise. "Really?" "Really?" She threw her arms around his neck. He caught her, held her tight, and felt the wall around his heart crack just a little. That evening, as darkness settled, Karim walked through the village toward the medical tent. He carried something wrapped in cloth. Sarah looked up as he approached, surprised. He stopped a few feet away, cleared his throat, extended the bundle awkwardly. "For you," he said in halting English. Sarah unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small wooden bird, carved with extraordinary detail, every feather visible, wings spread as if in flight. Her breath caught. "This is beautiful." Karim shifted his weight. "You teach my daughter. Help her see more. She's very special." "Yes," he paused. Then slowly, his weathered face softened into something Sarah hadn't seen before. A smile, small, uncertain, but real. "Thank you," he said simply. Sarah smiled back, her eyes bright. "You're welcome." He nodded once, turned, walked back toward his home with his shoulders a little straighter. Sarah held the wooden bird up to the lamplight. It caught the glow, seemed almost alive. For the first time in weeks, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt possible. The dust storm arrived with the dawn. Jack squinted through the swirling sand, one hand shielding his eyes as his unit's convoy crawled along the rocky road. The wind howled like something alive, turning the world into shades of brown and gray. "Visibility's down to nothing," his sergeant shouted over the roar. "Keep moving," Jack called back. "Slow and steady." They were returning to patrol the valley near Amina's village, part of Operation Little Star's quiet protection effort. Jack's legs still ached, but he'd insisted on joining. Some things you couldn't do from a hospital bed. The storm lasted 2 hours. When it finally broke, the landscape emerged freshly scoured, the mountains sharp against a clearing sky. The village appeared ahead. Jack's pulse quickened. He told himself it was just another patrol, just another checkpoint. But his eyes scanned the scattered homes, searching. The convoy rolled to a stop at the village edge, and then he saw her. Amina stood near the well, her scarf wrapped tight against the lingering dust. She clutched her doll to her chest with both hands. Their eyes met. For one frozen moment, neither moved. Then Amina's face broke into the brightest smile Jack had ever seen. She ran. Her bare feet kicked up small clouds as she sprinted across the packed earth. Jack barely had time to kneel before she crashed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck. "Easy," he laughed, catching her. "Easy, little one." She pulled back, breathless and beaming, thrust her doll toward him. "For Lucky," she said carefully in English. Her accent was thick, but the words were clear. Jack's chest tightened. He took the worn doll gently, cradling it like something precious. "For me?" She nodded vigorously. "You keep Lucky." He looked down at the doll, its faded dress, its missing button eye. The same doll she'd carried into the minefield, the same one she'd clung to while saving his life. Something warm and painful bloomed behind his ribs. "Thank you," he said softly. "I'll keep her safe." "You keep you safe," Amina corrected, pointing at him seriously. Jack laughed. Actually laughed. The sound felt foreign in his throat, rusty from disuse. But it came anyway, rolling out into the morning air. His men exchanged glances, quiet smiles. "Haven't heard that sound in months," one murmured. Sarah emerged from her medical tent, drawn by the commotion. She stopped when she saw Jack holding Amina's hand, both of them grinning like they'd known each other forever. "Well," she said warmly, "looks like someone's happy to see you." The feeling's mutual. Movement caught Jack's eye. He looked up to see Karim approaching slowly, his expression unreadable. Jack straightened instinctively, set Amina gently aside and waited. The older man stopped a few feet away, studied Jack's face for a long moment. The wind whispered between them. Finally, Karim spoke in Pashto, low and measured. Sarah stepped forward. "He says he wants to thank you." Jack blinked. "For what?" Sarah translated, listened. "For coming back, for the supplies, for treating his daughter with respect." She paused. "He says you are a man of honor." Karim continued speaking, his voice roughened with emotion. "He says," Sarah's own voice caught, "he says you remind him that not all foreigners bring death. Some bring hope." Jack's throat went tight. He pressed his right fist to his heart and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of respect he'd learned from previous deployments. "Tell him the honor is mine. His daughter saved my life." "I can never repay that," Sarah translated. Karim's weathered face softened. He gestured toward his home, spoke again. "He's inviting you to share a meal," Sarah said. "Bread and tea." Jack glanced at his sergeant, who nodded permission. "We've got time." They sat on woven mats outside Karim's home, the morning sun warming their faces. Amina's mother brought flatbread, still warm, and poured tea into small cups with practiced grace. Karim tore bread and offered the first piece to Jack, a gesture of welcome, of trust. Jack accepted it solemnly, tasted the simple food, and found it better than anything he'd eaten in months. They didn't share many words. Language remained a barrier, but they shared the meal in comfortable silence, passing bread and tea back and forth. Amina sat between them, swinging her legs and chattering happily in Pashto. Her father smiled, actually smiled, and Jack found himself smiling back. "Your daughter is very brave," Jack said, knowing Sarah would translate. Karim nodded slowly, responded. "He says she has her brother's heart," Sarah translated quietly. "Fearless. Too fearless, sometimes." Jack looked at Amina, her bright eyes, her gap-toothed grin. "We'll keep her safe," he promised, meeting Kareem's gaze directly. "I give you my word," Sarah translated. Kareem held Jack's eyes for a long moment, then nodded once, firmly. It was enough. They finished the meal as the sun climbed higher. The village hummed with life around them, children playing, women working, the ordinary rhythm of survival. For a few precious moments, war felt distant. Twilight painted the sky purple and gold as Jack's unit prepared to leave. Amina hugged him one more time, then ran back to her father's side. Jack secured the doll carefully in his pack, looked back at the village, at the family who'd welcomed him. Then gunfire cracked across the valley. Sharp, close, unmistakable. Everyone froze. Jack's hand went to his rifle automatically. His men scattered to defensive positions. "Where?" his sergeant barked. "East Ridge, maybe half a click out." More shots, a different weapon. Return fire. Jack looked toward the darkening horizon. His jaw tightened. Sarah appeared at his elbow. "What is it?" "Trouble," he said quietly, "the kind that doesn't go away." The radio crackled at 3 in the morning. Jack bolted upright in his bunk, instantly awake. Years of deployments had trained his body to respond before his mind fully caught up. "Commander Reynolds, urgent intel coming through." He grabbed his headset. "Go ahead." The voice on the other end was tight with tension. "We intercepted chatter. Militant forces are planning coordinated strikes on humanitarian convoys, multiple targets. They're moving tonight." Jack's blood went cold. "Which routes?" "Valley roads. The ones we use for civilian transport. The same roads that ran past Amina's village?" "When?" "Dawn. Maybe sooner." Jack was on his feet before the transmission ended. He yanked on his boots, his mind already racing through logistics. They had maybe 3 hours, maybe less. "Wake everyone!" he barked into his radio. "Full alert! I want evacuation protocols ready in 15 minutes. He burst into the command tent where Sarah was sleeping on a cot, having stayed late treating patients. "Sarah, get up." She sat up immediately, reading his face. "What's wrong?" "We need to evacuate the village. Now." The convoy assembled in record time. 3 trucks, reinforced. Medical supplies loaded. Sarah coordinated with practiced efficiency, her clipboard clutched tight as she checked names against her list. Jack paced near the lead vehicle, scanning the dark horizon. The mountains were black shapes against a slightly lighter sky. Dawn was maybe an hour away. Villagers arrived in small clusters, confused, frightened, clutching whatever they could carry. Kareem appeared with his family. His wife held a small bundle of belongings. Amina gripped her doll with both hands, her eyes wide in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah knelt beside her. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're just taking a little trip." Amina looked up at Jack. "Lucky?" she whispered, touching the pack where he'd stored her doll. "Safe," he assured her. "Just like you're going to be." She nodded, but didn't let go of the new doll her mother had given her. Her lips moved silently. Prayers, Jack realized. The same prayers her mother had taught her. "Load up," Jack called. "We move in 5. Sarah helped Amina and her family into the second truck. The girl pressed against the window, watching Jack. He gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile. The engines rumbled to life. They rolled through the valley as the sky began to lighten. Gray dawn crept over the mountains, revealing the rocky terrain in shades of shadow and stone. Jack rode in the lead vehicle, rifle ready, eyes constantly moving. His sergeant drove. 2 other SEALs scanned from the back. "How far to the checkpoint?" Jack asked. 3 clicks, maybe 10 minutes. The convoy moved slowly, carefully. The road was rough, full of potholes and loose rocks. They couldn't afford to rush and risk breaking an axle. Behind them, the second truck carried Amina's family. The third brought up the rear with remaining villagers and supplies. Sarah's voice crackled over the radio. "Everyone's secure back here. How's it looking up front?" "Clear so far. Stay alert." The valley narrowed, High ridges rose on both sides, creating natural choke points. Jack didn't like it. Too many places for an ambush. "Eyes on those ridges," he ordered. The sun broke over the eastern mountains. Golden light spilled across the valley. Then the world exploded. The blast hit the lead vehicle from the right side. The force lifted the truck, flipping it like a child's toy. Jack's body slammed against metal. Glass shattered. The vehicle crashed onto its side in a screech of grinding steel. Gunfire erupted from both ridges. Automatic weapons. Multiple shooters. "Ambush!" someone screamed. Jack kicked at the door, dazed. Blood ran into his eyes. He crawled through the shattered window as bullets pinged off the overturned truck. "Return fire! Protect the civilians!" His men scattered to defensive positions. Muzzle flashes lit up the ridgelines. Smoke filled the air, thick and choking. The second truck swerved, its driver trying to avoid the crater. More explosions. Jack couldn't see through the smoke and dust. "Sarah!" he shouted into his radio. "Sarah! Report!" Static. "Amina's truck! Someone give me eyes on the second vehicle!" More gunfire, screaming. The acrid smell of burning rubber, and something worse. Jack ran toward where the second truck should be, stumbled through smoke so thick he could barely breathe. His lungs burned. His legs screamed where the old wound had torn open again. "Amina!" he called. "Amina!" A figure emerged from the smoke. Sarah, bleeding from a cut on her forehead, supporting an injured villager. "Where is she?" Jack grabbed Sarah's shoulders. "Where's the girl?" Sarah's face crumpled. "The truck. It rolled." "I don't—" Jack ran past her, found the second vehicle on its side, windows blown out, bodies scattered, wounded crying out in pain and terror. He searched frantically, pulled debris aside with his bare hands. "Amina!" "Answer me!" His men worked around him, dragging survivors clear, applying pressure to wounds, calling for medical evacuation. Jack moved through the wreckage like a man possessed, lifted metal, shifted seats, searched every shadow. Then he saw it, half buried in scorched dirt. One arm burned black, the fabric dress charred beyond recognition. Amina's doll. Jack fell to his knees. His hands shook as he reached for it. The small toy felt impossibly heavy as he lifted it from the ash. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He clutched the ruined doll to his chest, looked around at the destruction, at the smoke, at the blood soaking into thirsty earth. "Amina!" His voice broke, shattered into something raw and animal. Sarah's hands closed on his shoulders. "Jack! Jack! We have to move! More trucks coming!" He couldn't hear her. Couldn't hear anything except the roaring in his ears. The world tilted, went gray at the edges. The doll slipped from his fingers. Strong hands grabbed him, pulled him up, dragged him backward. "Commander's hit. Get him to medical." Darkness swallowed him whole. The calendar on the wall showed October. Last month, it had been September. Before that, August. The pages turned, but the days felt the same. Jack sat at his desk in the Veterans Rehabilitation Center, reviewing intake forms. Outside the window, leaves fell from oak trees in slow spirals. Red, gold, brown. The Virginia autumn painted everything in colors he barely noticed anymore. "Morning, Commander!" A young Marine appeared in the doorway, leaning on crutches. His left leg ended at the knee. Jack looked up, forced to smile. "Morning, Corporal Davis. How's the new prosthetic fitting?" "Getting there. Hurts like hell." "It will for a while. You're doing good work." The Marine nodded and moved on. Jack returned to his paperwork. Names, injuries, treatment plans. The routine held him together. Barely. His mornings started at 5. Morning prayers in the chapel. Breakfast alone. Then the center opened and wounded men filled the hallways. Men missing limbs. Men who couldn't sleep. Men who saw ghosts in every shadow. Jack helped them, listened to their stories, guided them through exercises and pain. He was good at it, patient, understanding. He knew their wounds because he carried the same ones, but he never spoke of Afghanistan. The therapists asked, other veterans asked. Everyone wanted to know about his service, his decorations, the scars on his leg and shoulder. He told them nothing. At noon, he ate lunch in his office, sandwich from the cafeteria, coffee that tasted like cardboard. Through his window, he watched the river that ran past the center, water moving endlessly forward, never looking back. Afternoon sessions blurred into evening. More forms, more pain, more healing that never felt complete. When the sun set, Jack locked his office door, pulled a small box from his bottom drawer, opened it with hands that still shook sometimes. The doll sat inside, wrapped in cloth, burned beyond recognition, one arm missing, the face melted into darkness. He stared at it every night, couldn't explain why he kept it, couldn't throw it away. Some nights he whispered prayers over it, prayers for forgiveness, for peace, for a little girl who had deserved so much better than the world gave her. Most nights he just sat in silence until the darkness outside matched the darkness inside. November arrived. Then, December. The calendar pages turned. Jack stood in the therapy room, spotting a sergeant doing arm exercises. 3 more reps. You've got this. The sergeant gritted his teeth, pushed through. Jack counted quietly. A knock at the door interrupted them. Come in. The door opened. Jack glanced over, expecting another staff member. Sarah stood in the doorway. His breath caught. She looked different. Thinner, maybe. Tired. Her hair was shorter. She wore civilian clothes instead of her uniform. Hey, Jack, she said quietly. The sergeant looked between them. Want me to come back later, Commander? No, we're done for today. Good work. Jack's voice came out steady, professional. Nothing like the chaos suddenly spinning in his chest. The sergeant left. The door clicked shut. Sarah took a few steps into the room. You're hard to find. Wasn't trying to be found. I know. She held a manila envelope in her hands. Her fingers worried at the edges. I've been trying to reach you for months. You changed your number. Jack moved to the window. Couldn't look at her. Needed a fresh start. Jack, how'd you find me? Called every VA center on the East Coast. She moved closer. I brought something. Letters. From refugees we helped resettle. Families from the convoy. They wanted you to know they made it. That they're safe. He shook his head. I can't. You saved them. 14 people survived because one didn't. His voice cracked. That's all that matters. Silence filled the space between them. Outside, wind rattled bare branches. Sarah set the envelope on his desk. They want to thank you. I don't want their thanks. What do you want? The question hung in the air. Jack turned to face her finally. I want to go back. I want to do it different. He stopped, closed his eyes. Doesn't matter what I want. Sarah reached into her jacket, pulled out something wrapped in clean white cloth. Jack's chest tightened. She walked to his desk, set it down gently beside the envelope, unwrapped it slowly. The doll lay there, the same burned, broken doll from his drawer, except this one was still in his office. This one. Jack stared. His mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. She lived. His head snapped up. Disbelief flooded his face. What? Sarah pulled out the chair across from his desk, sat down slowly. Her hands trembled as she folded them in her lap. After the convoy was hit, she began, everything was chaos, smoke everywhere, people screaming. We thought, her voice caught, we thought we'd lost so many. Jack couldn't move, couldn't speak. Aid workers from an international medical team were nearby. They heard the explosion and came running. They found Amina under the wreckage of a supply truck. She'd been thrown clear of the worst of it, but her leg was badly injured, broken in 3 places. Sarah's eyes glistened. They got her to a hospital in Kabul. The doctors worked on her for hours. Her mother never left her side. Her mother survived too? Jack's voice came out hoarse. Yes. And her father? They were in a different vehicle. Sarah reached across the desk. Jack, I tried to tell you. I sent messages through your unit. They said you'd been sent home, that you didn't want contact. He had told them that. Had refused every letter, every call. Couldn't bear to hear about the aftermath of his failure. She spent 3 months in the hospital, Sarah continued, learning to walk again. The whole time she kept asking for the tall soldier, kept saying she needed to return something to you. Jack's gaze dropped to the doll. After she recovered, we got her family into a humanitarian relocation program. It took 9 more months of paperwork, background checks, medical clearances, but they're here now, in America. The room spun. Jack gripped the edge of his desk. Here? Where? They arrived at Dover Air Force Base 3 days ago. They've been in processing. But Jack, Sarah leaned forward. She asked for you, every single day. The moment she could speak enough English, she told everyone about the soldier who promised to keep her safe. His throat tightened. I didn't. I failed. You didn't fail. You gave her hope. You gave her family a chance. Sarah stood. There's a military escort going to meet them tomorrow. Final processing before they relocate to their permanent home. They're flying into Joint Base Andrews. She paused. I can get you on that escort. Jack looked at the doll again. The one he'd carried for a year, believing it was all that remained. I don't know if I can. She's waiting for you. The next morning, Jack stood on the tarmac at Andrews. Cold December wind cut through his jacket. Gray clouds hung low over the runway. He'd barely slept. Had spent the night pacing his apartment, praying, asking God if this was real or just another cruel dream. Sarah stood beside him, along with a dozen other soldiers who'd volunteered to welcome the refugee families. Everyone knew the story now. The little girl who'd walked into a minefield. The Navy SEAL she'd saved. Transports on approach, someone called out. Jack's heart hammered against his ribs. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The plane appeared through the clouds, a massive C-17, its wings catching the weak sunlight. It descended steadily, wheels touching down with a screech of rubber. The engine's roar filled the air as it taxied toward them. Sarah touched his arm. Breathe, Jack. He tried. Couldn't. The plane stopped 50 yards away. The rear ramp began to lower with a mechanical whine. Figures appeared in the dark interior. Aid workers came first, then families, men, women, children, all bundled against the cold. They moved slowly down the ramp, eyes wide at their new country. Jack searched every face, couldn't find her. Then she appeared, older, taller than he remembered. Her dark hair pulled back in a braid. She wore a donated winter coat 3 sizes too big. And she held a crutch, simple, metal, supporting her left side as she navigated the ramp carefully. But her eyes, those same brave, impossibly bright eyes, scanned the crowd until they found him. She stopped, went completely still. Jack couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His vision blurred with tears he'd held back for 12 months. He took a step forward, then another. His legs barely worked. Amina handed her crutch to her mother, tested her weight on both legs. The injured one held. Then she ran. Jack dropped to his knees on the cold concrete, opened his arms. She crashed into him, small and fierce and alive. Her arms wrapped around his neck. She buried her face against his shoulder. "No die," she whispered. The same words from that terrible night. "No die." Jack held her like he'd never let go. Sobs shook his whole body. "You're alive. You're alive." "You too," she said softly. "You too." Around them, the base erupted. Soldiers applauded. Some cheered. Others wiped their eyes. Sarah stood back, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in a year, Jack felt it. That thing he'd thought was gone forever. Hope. Not the fragile kind that breaks at the first sign of trouble, but the stubborn, impossible kind. The kind that walks into minefields, the kind that survives explosions, the kind that crosses oceans, the kind that refuses to die. Jack pulled back just enough to see Amina's face. She was crying too, smiling through her tears. "Miracle," he whispered. She nodded. "Miracle." The morning sun broke through the clouds just as the ceremony began. Frost clung to the parade ground's edges, but the sky had cleared to brilliant blue. Jack stood at attention near the platform, his dress uniform sharp and clean. He'd polished his shoes 3 times that morning, couldn't stop his hands from moving, needed something to do with the nervous energy coursing through him. Beside him, Amina shifted from foot to foot. She wore a new dress, dark blue with white flowers, that Sarah had helped her pick out. Her hair was braided with ribbons. She kept touching the fabric, like she couldn't believe it was real. "You okay?" Jack asked quietly. She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. He smiled. "Me too." Rows of soldiers stood in perfect formation across the grounds. 100 men and women, all volunteers, all who'd served in Afghanistan, all who'd heard the story of a little girl's courage. Some had marched to her village that first day. Others had joined later, after word spread through the ranks. But every single one had contributed to what was about to be announced. General Wallace approached the podium. His silver hair caught the sunlight. His uniform bore more medals than Jack could count. Decades of service etched in ribbon and bronze. "At ease," the general commanded. The formation relaxed. Not much, just enough. Wallace's voice carried across the grounds, strong despite his age. "We gather this morning to honor an act of extraordinary courage, not from a trained soldier, not from someone who took an oath, but from a child who saw someone in need and refused to look away." Amina's hand found Jack's, her small fingers squeezed tight. 8 years old, Wallace continued. Barefoot, armed with nothing but a doll and a heart bigger than fear itself, she walked into a minefield to save a stranger's life. The soldiers stood motionless. Some had heard this before. Others were learning it for the first time. But every face showed the same expression: awe, mixed with humility. Commander Reynolds survived that day because of her bravery, but her impact didn't stop there. Wallace gestured to the formation. These men and women were changed by her example, reminded of why we serve, what we're truly fighting for. Jack felt his throat tighten. He'd written the general months ago, before he even knew Amina had survived, a letter full of grief and desperate hope, a plea to make her sacrifice mean something. Wallace had written back personally. One sentence: "We will." "Today," the general said, "we establish the Amina Foundation for Children of War, a scholarship fund dedicated to educating children affected by conflict, to giving them opportunities they would never otherwise have." 2 soldiers carried a large plaque forward, draped in cloth. They positioned it on an easel beside the podium. "Every person in this formation has contributed," Wallace continued. "Some gave a day's pay. Others gave more. But every dollar comes from those who understand what this child represents, the absolute best of humanity in the absolute worst of circumstances." Amina's grip tightened. She didn't understand all the words, but she felt their weight. Wallace nodded to the soldiers holding the cloth. "Unveil it." They pulled the fabric away. The plaque gleamed, polished brass mounted on dark wood. Engraved at the top was her name, in elegant script, the Amina Foundation. Below it, a simple inscription: "For children who walk where others fear to tread." At the bottom, a list of names. 100 soldiers, all who had contributed. Amina's breath caught. She stared at the plaque, at her name spelled out in permanent letters, and tears spilled down her cheeks. Jack knelt beside her. "You see that? That's you. That's forever." She touched his face. "Why?" Because you showed us how to be brave, how to choose love over fear. You saved more than my life that night, Amina. You saved something in all of us." The general stepped down from the podium, approached them slowly. He stopped in front of Amina and lowered himself to one knee, his old joints protesting. "Miss Amina," he said formally, "on behalf of the United States Armed Forces, thank you. For your courage, for your compassion, for reminding us what we're fighting to protect." He extended his hand. Amina looked at Jack. He nodded encouragement. She shook the general's hand solemnly, like she'd seen adults do. The formation erupted in applause. Not polite ceremony clapping, but thunderous appreciation. Soldiers who'd seen too much darkness celebrating this one brilliant light. Jack stood, looked down at Amina. "You ready?" "Ready for what?" He grinned. "Come here." He lifted her carefully, mindful of her healing leg, and settled her on his shoulders. She gasped, suddenly taller than everyone around her. The military band struck up the first notes of the national anthem, the American one first, familiar and stirring. Soldiers snapped to attention, hands over hearts. Amina went very still above him. She'd never heard music like this. When it finished, the band transitioned seamlessly into Afghanistan's anthem. The melody rose and fell, beautiful and mournful and proud all at once. Jack felt Amina's small hands press against the top of his head, felt her tears drip onto his hair. As the final notes faded, he spoke loud enough for her to hear. "Now, the world will walk safely because of you." She didn't respond, just held tighter. General Wallace raised his hand in salute. Sharp, precise, honoring her like she wore stars instead of ribbons. Every soldier in formation followed. 100 hands rose as one. 100 faces turned toward the smallest hero among them. Amina lifted her hand hesitantly, tried to copy what she saw. Jack reached up and guided her arm into the proper position. Just like that. Perfect. 3 weeks had passed since the ceremony. Jack still wasn't used to sleeping through the night without nightmares, but some mornings were easier than others. This morning, he stood in a parking lot watching construction workers put finishing touches on a building that shouldn't exist. A school shaped like a dollhouse, wide windows, red shutters, a peaked roof that made it look like something from a storybook. "It's bigger than I imagined," Sarah said beside him. "Everything's bigger when you make it real." Jack adjusted his coat against the October chill. Amina stood between them, her crutch long abandoned. The doctors said her leg had healed better than expected. She bounced on her toes, unable to stand still. "My house," she whispered. "Your school," Jack corrected gently. "For lots of kids." The principal approached, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Chen, who'd spent 20 years teaching military children. "We're ready when you are." Jack nodded. They'd been planning this moment for weeks. The school would officially open next month, but today was special. Today, Amina would plant the first tree in the courtyard. They walked through the front entrance together. Inside, the walls were painted warm yellows and soft blues. Classrooms branched off a central hallway. Each door bore a name plaque, waiting to be filled. "Children from everywhere," Mrs. Chen explained. "Military families, refugees, anyone who needs a safe place to learn and grow." Amina touched the walls as they passed, ran her fingers over the smooth paint. Jack remembered the crumbling mud walls of her village, the bullet holes, the scorch marks. This was different. This was permanent. The courtyard opened before them, a rectangle of grass surrounded by the school's arms. In the center, someone had dug a hole. Beside it sat a young tree wrapped in burlap, its branches bare for winter. A small crowd had gathered. Other military families, volunteers who'd helped build the school, reporters with cameras, keeping a respectful distance. Mrs. Chen handed Amina a silver spade, child-sized, engraved with her name. "It's a dogwood tree," the principal explained. "In spring, it will bloom with white flowers. Very beautiful." Amina looked up at Jack. "I plant? You plant." He knelt beside her. "But first, do you want to say something? About why we're doing this?" She thought for a moment. Her English had improved rapidly, but she still chose words carefully. "This tree," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd leaned closer. "This tree is for all children who walked in fear." Sarah pressed a hand to her mouth. Amina continued, stronger now. "For children with no school, no safe ground. For children who want to run, but cannot." She stepped to the edge of the hole, looked down at the dark soil. "I was scared in the minefield. Every step, I was scared. But I walked anyway, because someone needed help." Jack moved beside her. Together, they lifted the tree. It was heavier than it looked. They lowered it carefully into the hole, adjusting until it stood straight. "Now," Jack said, "we give it roots." He scooped soil with his hands, let it fall around the base. Amina copied him, patting the earth down with small, deliberate movements. They worked in silence, just the sound of dirt settling, of something taking hold. Jack's mind drifted as his hands moved. 1 year ago, he'd been lying in that minefield convinced he'd die, convinced his life had been wasted. Too many missions, too much destruction, not enough to show for it. Then a child proved him wrong. One act, one moment of pure courage, and it had multiplied into this: a school, a foundation, a future for children who needed it most. He thought of the men he'd lost, the villages destroyed, the darkness that had nearly swallowed him whole. All of it was still true, still painful, but it didn't own him anymore, because goodness multiplied too, faster than fear, stronger than hate. "Enough?" Amina asked. Jack looked at the tree, secure now, ready to grow. "It's perfect." Sarah brought a watering can. Amina poured slowly, watching the water disappear into the soil, life finding its way down to the roots. The first snowflakes began to fall, tiny and delicate. They caught in Amina's hair like stars. She turned to Jack, reached out, and pressed her small hand over his leg, right where the scar ran beneath his pants. The scar she'd bandaged with her own scarf a lifetime ago. "See?" She smiled up at him. "God made good." His throat closed. He couldn't speak, could only nod. Around them, other children began arriving for the tour. Military kids with parents in uniform, refugee children holding their mothers' hands, all of them gathering in this courtyard where a tree now stood. They ran past the sapling, laughed under the first snowfall. Their voices echoed off the walls of a building shaped like hope. Jack watched them. These children who would learn here, grow here, build friendships across every line that usually divided people. And he smiled, really smiled. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest lifted completely. Sarah stood beside him, her arm linked through his. "You did this." "No." He shook his head. "She did." I hope you enjoyed that story. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you do not miss out on tomorrow's story. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy.